إن في الجنة نهرا من لبن.
خيرا. Thank you, Jazakumullah. Takbir! So where do we move from Turkey? The seat of the Ottoman Empire, gone. Erbakan made an attempt to create a new identity, a new entity. A few years ago, when the Secretary of State, Madam Albright, invited some of us, the Muslim leaders here, and she was giving us an overview of the countries that she had visited. And she said that I talked to this and that and these heads of the countries. I said, Madam, when you met the Prime Minister of Turkey, the President of Turkey, what did you tell him? You are giving these people arms, you are giving them ammunition, you are giving them support, you are giving them aid, making them stronger and stronger in their oppression. But we would like you to know that America is now having in its midst a powerful, vibrant Islamic community. When you meet these heads of these dictators, these potentates, talk to them on our behalf, on behalf of the new America. Tell them that they cannot succeed, they cannot bring prosperity, they cannot bring welfare to their people until they introduce true democracy. Tell them, in America we have prayed, we have broken our fast in the White House. We have regular prayers, Friday prayers and other prayers in the Capitol Hill. Tell them that Siraj Wahaj began the Senate's proceedings with the recitation of the Quran, and it did not in any way detract from the democracy, from the secularism of America. Convey it to them. Tell them that in America we have promoted hijab for Muslims. Muslims are free to use their hijab. Our daughters, our sisters, our wives in America, they have prestigious positions. It does not affect their professionalism. It does not affect their role in public places if they are wearing hijab. Why would our daughter, Marwa Kavakchi, who was overwhelmingly elected as the member of the parliament of Turkey, why would the Turkish government feel threatened by that light scarf that she wears on her head? Our American leaders need to be educated so that they can educate in turn the dictators and the potentates and these autocrats and these military rulers in the Muslim world. So that's why I will have to move to Mauritania now. How do I go to Mauritania? So it reminds me of Mauritania, that beloved country. It is a monolithic country. It has preserved the Islamic traditions, Islamic conventions in its pure and pristine form. It was in Mauritania that our Shaykh Hamza was groomed to be a Shaykh for America. So we will request Brother Hamza Yusuf to address and tell us how diversity could be a strength in America, as it is in Mauritania.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I thought I would never hear that. I'm really happy to hear that. Alhamdulillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wa salatu wa salamu ala ashraf al-anbiya'i wal-mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahabatihi wa man tabi'uhum bi ihsanin ila yawm ad-din. Alhamdulillah. Nahmadullah subhanahu wa ta'ala ilaykum jami'an. وأحييكم بتحية الإسلام السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وأصلي وأسلم على رسول الله على أفضل خلق الله وأقول لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. I am inspired by the presence of some of the people in this room, because I don't think all of us realize the courage, that we're witnessing. Because I think it's very easy for us to see somebody being honored with an award, but it's often difficult for us to recognize that for the few awards that he has been given, he has been slandered, his character, because the tyrants of the world know that if you don't assassinate a person, then you assassinate their character. And I think that we're witnessing a recognition of a global struggle which is nothing less than the desire for individuals, for communities, and for countries to live how they wish to live by the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The vast majority of Muslims in the Muslim world, and we know this for a fact, the vast majority of Muslims in the Muslim world desire to live according to Islam. But they have been prevented from realizing that both at the democratic ballot and under the tyrannies that have never allowed the ballot to be used. Turkey is a country, and when I heard that song, and I'm going to be, they say, the Prophet ﷺ, and it's a true hadith, man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir falyaqul khayran aw liyasmut. But I just want to say, if you want an anthem, and I told Professor Erbakan, we need some Ottoman military music, because that will put you to sleep. We want to wake people up. We want to call them to the truth, and the truth is struggle. And when I sit in the presence, because Sister Merv is, wallahi, she's one of my heroes, because I believe that this woman represents the essence of the struggle of truth against falsehood. Somebody who stood up for her beliefs and suffered for that, was humiliated in the eyes of the people of the dunya, and chased out by people who claim to be adherents to a democratic society, when even their masters who taught them democracy would not do the same thing in their own parliaments. But this is the danger of pale imitation, because the imitator never does justice to the one he is imitating. He becomes a caricature. He becomes a joke. But I'm inspired by these people, by the Ottoman people, because the Ottoman dynasty and the Sultanate of the Ottoman Empire is the longest in our history. And I'm not talking about Muslim history, I'm talking about the history of human civilizations. And despite the fact that there were many egregious errors that the Ottomans unfortunately fell into, nonetheless, if we look at the Ottoman Empire in its glory days, we see something that is extraordinary, something that should inspire each of you to know that you come from an ummah of a people whose building standards were so great that in the earthquake, one of the biggest earthquakes of modern history, what was left standing? The Ottoman buildings. Because they were built by people who believed that civilization is the service of humanity. They were built with standards, with codes, and those codes were checked by the people of Hispa. The people of Hispa are the people who assure that the rights of the population are being served, Because the government in every time, in every place, with the exception of the prophets, is a necessary evil. It has never been anything other than a necessary evil. And if you think otherwise, you know nothing of the tariq, of the history of humanity. Government is a necessary evil. It was called so by the founding fathers of the United States of America. The father of this country said that that government governs best which governs least. This was the belief of the Americans. They saw government as a necessary evil. Our scholars have always seen government as a necessary evil. At best it's benign, and at worst it's a tyrant that will tyrannize people, causing them to live in the worst forms of terror. And we as a Muslim community have been commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to rise up and to speak the truth in face of tyranny. And this is the greatest jihad. The greatest jihad is not to cut off a man's head. The greatest jihad is to speak the truth in the presence of unjust government. This is the jihad of the Muslims. It is to stand in the face of unjust government and to speak the truth. And this is our destiny. This is our divine destiny as a community. We are people that have to stand for justice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Be shuhada, kunu shuhada ala nas. Be shuhada ala nas. Allah says, Bil qist, with justice, walau ala anfusikum, even if it's against your own selves. This is the essence of this teaching, to say that even if you have to speak the truth against yourselves, and we're forced to do that in these days because we reject the tyrannies of the vast majority of the Muslim world. We reject these governments. We don't see them as representational governments. We see them as travesties of justice. They are travesties of justice, pale imitations of the worst aspects of the West, not the best. And we in America at this time have the ability to speak, and therefore we have to speak. We have to recognize that we have to be courageous, like the courage of these people in front of. These are the examples. In a just world, a woman like Merv would be a role model for our women, not prostitutes, pornography, Britney Spears. Every woman in America is walking around with her belly button exposed. They weren't doing it last year or the year before. Really? Why are they doing this? Because they've been brainwashed to accept the most vile elements of society as role models and examples. This country is in a very, very dangerous point in its history. They're facing economic collapse. And don't think that this economic bust is because a few people misgauged. There are people all over the world making dua that this country collapses. There are people in Palestine right now making prayer that this country suffers just as they have suffered at the hands of a government supported by this country with the tax dollars of the American people, the vast majority of whom who have been put to sleep by rock music, by movies with anti-heroes, not with heroes, with anti-heroes. This is the reality of the time we're living in. We have to warn these people, and we have to give them good news. Bashiru. Give them good news, but also give them the indar, because the Prophet ﷺ is bashiran wa nadhiran bayna yaday as-sa'ah. He is a giver of good news, and he is a warner. We have to warn ourselves. We have to recognize that the usurious system that has taken over the entire globe must be condemned. Just as it was condemned by St. Augustine, by Aristotle, by St. Thomas Aquinas, by all of their great philosophers, and even by their modern economist John Maynard Keynes. All of their intellects have condemned usury. Even their poets like Shakespeare condemn usury in The Merchant of Venice. We have to remind them of this fact. We have to remind them that if they continue in this way, they will destroy what is good in their country, and there is much good in this country. لا تبخسوا الناس أشياءهم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not shortchange people, do not give people their full measure. There's much good in this country, but there's also much ignorance and there's also much wrong. We should recognize the good, commend them for what they do right, but also recognize the wrong and edify these people, illuminate them to what is wrong with their society so that they can wake up. We have a glorious past. We're an unemployed civilization. An unemployed civilization, if you come to and you want a job and you're unemployed, you don't tell them I'm unemployed. You show them your CV. Curriculum vitae or whatever they call it. You show them what you did in the past. I used to be the director of this bank. I used to be this. I used to be that. That's how you get your job. The Muslims are unemployed now, and we have the greatest civilizational CVs, civilizational vitae. The greatest civilizations that existed. The bowls that the Ottomans ate from in their houses are sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars in Sotheby's. The bowls that those people ate from, the rugs that they sat on. Really, the bowls that these people ate from are now sold for tens of thousands of dollars. Because they reached the pinnacles of civilization, but just like everything reaches its pinnacle, it must come down. Because the Prophet ﷺ, who had a beautiful horse, camel, who used to defeat all the camels, and one day it lost. And the Sahaba were very grievous about this. And the Prophet ﷺ said, nothing in this world is raised up except that Allah has to abase it. Even the camel of the best of creation. This is the nature of life. It's ups and downs. The Muslims are in a down, but I want to do now a few things because I want to get a message that I think is absolutely essential, and I'm not going to take a lot of time because a lot of time has already transpired. One of the greatest historians of the 20th century was Arnold Toynbee. He was an English historian who believed that the essence of civilization was spiritual, that it was the spirit of a people that created civilization. In a book that he entitled Civilization on Trial, he has a chapter called Islam, the West, and the Future, written in 1947, published in 1948. He talks a lot about the Turkish people, but I want to focus on three things. The first thing that he talks about is he divides reaction to conquest into two: Herodians and Zealots. That there are people, Herodians like Muhammad Ali, who want to take on the West, embody them. Salim II of the Ottoman Empire was like this, and the worst form of it was Ataturk. These people are people that want to take on the form of the conqueror. The second group are the Zealots. The Zealots are people, he uses the example of Imam Sanusi in the Libyan desert, or the Wahhabis in the Arabian desert. And he says that the zealot is a reactionary. He's attempting to deal with a complete loss of his foundation. He's in a crisis, both psychological and sociological. And so his attempt at dealing with this is to lash out. He said that history shows that these people are squelched, and usually squelched more forcefully by the Herodians, and mentions that Muhammad Ali's first act once he modernized his army was to go and destroy the Wahhabi army in the Hijaz. So this is the tension that exists in the Ummah, is between Herodians and Zealots. Now, if I was to put myself in a category of those two, I think there's a third choice. But if I had to put, I would say I have the heart of a zealot, but the head of a Herodian. Because the Muslim is intelligent. The Muslim's not a fool. He uses his intellect. She uses her intellect. We have to understand the time we're living in, the nature of the time, and how we respond to that time. Instead of being reactionaries, we have to act in the best and most appropriate way. And this takes deliberation. And this is why there's two qualities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. And one of them is ta'anni, which is deliberation. Allah loves deliberation, that you reflect before you act. What the shuyukh of usul call nadhar al-ma'alat, looking at the long distance, the long range effects of your actions, not the short range. The Muslims have for too long been looking at the short range of their effects. They haven't been looking at the long range, our long-term strategy. Now, one of the things that he says, and I want to read this because I think it's such a profound analysis. He said that in the present encounter between Islam and the West may be expected to have on the future of mankind, we may ignore both the Islamic zealot and the Islamic Herodian insofar as they carry their respective reactions through to such measure of success as is open to them. For their utmost possible success is the negative achievement of material survival. That's the utmost of their success. The rare zealot who escapes extermination becomes the fossil of a civilization which is extinct as a living force. The rather less infrequent Herodian who escapes submergence becomes a mimic of the living civilization to which he assimilates himself. Less than 300 years ago, the ruler of Germany had his state portrait done in Ottoman dress with a turban and an Ottoman robe. The ruler of Germany. Why did he do that? He did it for the same reason that our pathetic caricatures in the Muslim lands have their state portraits done, if they have good taste, in a suit from Savile Row, and if they have bad taste, in a suit that looks like they bought it from some mafioso. Really, like they asked somebody to go and find in New Jersey, I'm sorry for the people of New Jersey, but somebody down in New Jersey to find some mafia leader and get a suit for him. That's what they look like. They look like mafioso. But the German ruler had his national portrait, and we have it, it's a historical document, wearing a turban and an Ottoman robe. Why? Because he was in awe of the Muslims. In the same way that these pathetic mimickers are in awe of their Western leaders. Now, the next thing, after he says that, and this is where I think it's very important. He says, what does Islam have to offer to this new civilization emerging? The first thing that he says, now listen very carefully, please. He says two conspicuous sources of danger, one psychological and the other material, in the present relations of this cosmopolitan proletariat with the dominant element in our modern Western society are race consciousness and alcohol. Intoxicants, because in his day they didn't have the mass problems of cocaine and heroin and all these other ailments. And in the struggle with each of these evils, the Islamic spirit has a service to render to the West, which might prove, if it were accepted, to be of high moral and social value. The extinction of race consciousness as between Muslims is one of the outstanding moral achievements of Islam, and in the contemporary world there is, as it happens, a crying need for the propagation of this Islamic virtue. وَالشَّاهِدُ مَا شَهِدَ بِهِ الْأَعْدَاءُ. Really, I mean, this is an extraordinary testimony. This man is a historian who knows history and knows that no other civilization on the face of the earth. My ancestors were in Greece. I had on one side, because I'm Scottish on one side, I'm Greek on one side. On my Greek side, I had Greek aunts that used to tell me that the Turks were the most evil people on the earth. Wallahi, my aunt you know, she was a wonderful lady, but you mentioned Turks, and she would go on a tirade about the Turk. They don't realize that the entire Greek culture is Turkish. They call it baklava, right? Really, they have moussaka. The Greek, they say this is moussaka, this is our dolmas, right? It's all Greek. Their dancing is Turkish. Their food is Turkish. They have worry beads. Our beads are to remove worry. They use them to worry. They have worry beads. They got those because the Turks did a lot of dhikr. That's all from the Turk, the whole. And when I realized that, I said, my God, how can we consider these people? They gave us our whole culture. Really. So I remember Allah's word when I think of that. وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ وَأَصْبَحْتُمْ بِنِعْمَتِهِ إِخْوَانًا. Think about that. Reflect on that. This was according to my family, these people were enemies of the Greeks. And now they're my beloved brothers and sisters in Islam. And this is the power of Islam, to remove these things from the heart. To remove them from the heart. To bind the hearts of the believers. And this is what we can offer to the West, because race consciousness is one of the most frightening underlying elements of this culture. We have serious race consciousness in this culture. And unfortunately, many Muslims have brought some of this with them. Not from Islam, but from the jahiliyyah of their cultures. The other thing that he talks about is alcohol. As for the evil of alcohol, it is at its worst among primitive populations, which have been opened up by Western Hemisphere. And though the more enlightened part of Western public opinion has long been conscious of this evil and has exerted itself to combat it, its power of effective action is rather narrowly limited. So what's he saying? The Muslims succeeded in doing it. In other words, he's saying we couldn't do it in the West. How did the Muslims do it? By belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he must be telling us to convert to Islam.
If you were there that time.
He's telling us we need to convert to Islam. Now I just want to finish this with his last statement. Now listen to this, please. This is so amazing. He said when Kemal Ataturk in 1922, finding the resuscitated caliphate incompatible with their own radically Herodian political ideas, first committed the historical solecism of equating the caliphate with spiritual as opposed to temporal power. This is the flaw of the West. They think that the spiritual has no business being in the temporal. The temporal can't exist without the spiritual. You'll destroy yourself, just like this country is destroying itself. You need the spirit. So what does he say? He said the Muslims who were distressed by this had a historic conference in Cairo in 1926 to see if they could restore the caliphate. And he said anyone who examines the records of this conference, which he did, will carry away the conviction that the caliphate is dead. And that this is so because pan-Islamism is dormant. Now this is a historian talking. He did not say pan-Islamicism is dead. He said pan-Islamicism is dormant. And dormant in the English language means asleep. And like a brother said, the horse sleeps standing up and fish sleep with their eyes open. So you can be walking around with your eyes wide open and be fast asleep. Pan-Islamism is dormant. Yet we have to reckon with the possibility that the sleeper may awake if ever the cosmopolitan proletariat of a westernized world. This is 1947. He's seeing the westernization as a historian, looking at the far-reaching effects of this. And he says, if the westernized world revolts against Western domination and cries out for anti-Western leadership, that call might have incalculable psychological effects in evoking the militant spirit of Islam, even if it had slumbered as long as the 7 sleepers, because it might awaken the echoes of a heroic age. On two historic occasions, this is a historian, on two historical occasions in the past, Islam has been the sign in which an Oriental society has risen up victoriously against the Occidental intruder. Under the first successors of the Prophet ﷺ, Islam liberated Syria and Egypt from a Hellenic domination which had weighed on them for nearly 1,000 years. Under Zangi and Nuruddin and Salahuddin and the Mamluks, Islam held the fort against the assaults of the Crusaders and the Mongols. If the present situation of mankind were to precipitate a race war, Islam might be moved to play her historic role once again. Islam might be moved to play her historic role once again. If we reflect on the heroic age of the past, then we should be inspired by the people of the past. Because like the American poet said, lives of great men remind us that we can make our lives sublime, and departing leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. Footprints on the sands of time. Footprints that perhaps another, sailing o'er life's forlorn main, a forsaken and shipwrecked brother, seeing shall take heart again. Let us then be up and doing, with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait. Lives of great men should remind us, and great women, that we too can be great. We have the potential in this room, we have the potential in this country, and we have the potential on this planet, but we have to wake up to our historical reality, to the position that Allah has placed us in as lights and guides for humanity, and not as reactionary, retroactive, retrograde people that have nothing to offer civilization. We have everything to offer them. And in closing, I want to mention the great Mauritanian scholar, because I was introduced by mentioning Mauritania. And Mauritania is a great country. It's a great country. It's a simple country, but it's a great country. And they are people that have a beautiful Islam. The great Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya, who has come to these shores and enlightened us and given us knowledge that we didn't have before, for all of us, says in a book about the future of our culture, he says, إنها ستكون في الشريعة تجلية قيمها وفضائلها قيم التسامح والعدل والشورى والتعايش والتواصل والروحانية والوحدة والتعدد في إطار الثوابت. That our Sharia will reveal the values and virtues that we possess, the virtue of tolerance, of justice, of mutual consultation, of mutual living together, of unification, of spirituality, of unity of ranks, and pluralism with the frame of our firmly rooted principles. This is a pluralism that will be revealed in the flexibility of our jurisprudence, and the vastness of the horizon of the Islamic Sharia, and the variations of our understanding of the Book of Allah, and the vastness of all of the proofs that Allah has given us in the light of the time we live on. لِتَحْقِيقِ مَقُولَةٍ هِيَ بِالتَّأْكِيدِ حَقٌّ, because it will realize a statement that is without a doubt a truth. إِنَّ الشَّرِيعَةَ صَالِحَةٌ لِكُلِّ زَمَانٍ وَمَكَانٍ. This sacred law that was given to us by the lawgiver, the creator of the heavens and the earth, of a moral universe. This law is sound for every time and place if it's understood in every time and place. وذلك بتسليط الاجتهاد على الربط المتواصل بين الزمان وبين الشريعة نصوصا ومقاصد وأصول وقواعد. And that is by connecting between the time we live in and our sacred law, in the text, in the intentions, in the usul, in the methodology, and in the principles. انطلاقا من مبدأين العقل والمصلحة, coming from two positions, the intellect and benefit. Because this is the whole point of the Sharia, and anyone who doesn't understand this does not understand the Sharia. Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya rahimahullah said, الشريعة كلها رحمة وعدل ومصلحة. All of the Sharia is rahmah, it's mercy, it's justice, it's benefit for humankind. All of the Sharia. And he said anything that does not have rahmah in it, that does not have justice in it, that does not have benefit in it, is not from the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he said, And this is done with three things that we have to understand: what is necessary, what is needful, and what ornaments our lives, based on 5 principles: removing doubt for certainty, using the understanding of the time we live in, removing harm and the necessities that human beings find themselves in, removing the difficulties and making ease instead of difficulty. This is what we have to do. We have to make things easy for people. التشديد يحسنه كل أحد. Everybody can be hard. The faqih is the one who, الفقه رخصة عن ثقة. It's taking ease from a trustworthy source. And I won't say an ease that leads us to a liberalism. And I see the brothers standing, telling me to get down, sit down, and stop talking. So I'm going to do that in honor of our guest, and also أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم. هذا سيد شريف من آل بيت رسول الله. الأئمة من قريش. The imams are from Quraysh, and he's a Kashmiri, and you don't want to mess with Kashmir. Don't mess with Kashmir. And don't mess with Afghanistan. They say here, don't mess with Texas. They haven't met the Afghanis yet. They haven't met the Pathans. They haven't met them, really. But the British met them, and the British said, how can we fight a people? They see the gates of paradise in the barrels of our guns. Let us see the gates of paradise in the barrels of their guns. Speak the truth wherever you are, and free Jamil al-Amin. أقول هذا القول وجزاكم الله خيرا.